sounds like, per her Annette's definition, I'm a new American.
What makes you a new American?
Because that's that whole you're an immigrant, new business, those sorts of things. That's what makes you a new American.
Now, just to get us started, like you were here last year in October, and we're going to get back to that. You had been appointed to the New Americans Task Force. You had won an award at that particular time. So maybe just for those maybe who are seeing you for the first time, talk to us about what's a New Americans Task Force. What do you guys do? And what have you been up to since the last time you were here in October last year?
And how much the sitting allowance is?
So perfect. All right, let's talk about it. So I was here in October. The New Americans Task Force is an initiative that started by Baltimore County Executive Johnny Olszewski, and this was part of a response to a research that was done that said that during this last few years, especially post-pandemic, all of the growth in Baltimore County was because of initiatives that were made by New Americans, and New Americans meaning immigrant individuals starting businesses, creating solutions to all of the issues that we were all facing during the pandemic times. So with this being the case, it was interesting to figure out how can we then not only support this growth that's happening, but what are the things that are being experienced by these individuals? Because we're talking about businesses, we're talking about students and elementary school up to high school and also college students. What can we do to make sure that the integration of this population does so in a way that optimizes for the entire county, right? Because we all succeed when everyone is able to succeed. The result of this was actually what I have here, it physically is the welcoming and belonging strategic plan. So different stakeholders within the county were able to participate in this New American Task Force, and they represented different areas. So we had people from the ISB, which is the Islamic Society of Baltimore, and then we also had individuals from the Kenyan community like myself, people from Hispanic communities, faith organizations, food drives. So many different diverse people came together to come up with a plan on how different agencies can actually create policies that are going to benefit every single person in the county, including immigrants specifically, because we have a unique experience.
Okay, that's very interesting. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome DJ Omoshfire. DJ Omoshfire is also in studio. DJ Omoshfire, karibu sana. Are you aware of what Annette has been doing with the New Americans Task Force? And are you a new American or are you an old American? DJ Omoshfire.
Asante sana. Annette, welcome to the show. So, it sounds like, per her Annette's definition, I'm a new American.
What makes you a new American?
Because that's that whole you're an immigrant, new business, those sorts of things. That's what makes you a new American.
Okay.
You didn't listen to the definition.
No. I mean, we're gonna go back.
Clear.
To
you are not in class, but it's okay. It's all right. It's okay. However, you asked also if I have heard of this thing, the report, and all of these things, and I am. This is news.
Okay.
I know nothing.
Okay. And Annette
so, as a new American, clearly I might be old.
You might be an old American.
Yes.
Okay. I also want to take this opportunity to welcome Mike, who's also in the building. Mike, are you a new American or are you an old American?
He's a Baltimorean.
Kwanza, I'm a new American, and by way of Muranga.
No, everybody knows one Mike is from Baltimore.
By way of Muranga. Muranga. I know you want to say Kangemi.
There's no Muranga in Baltimore.
Yeah, I was actually they had a session in Baltimore, and I can't remember the lady's name, but she was there, and a group of Kenyans came, and there was also a Zoom session, so we participated, and guys virtually through Zoom. So guys contributed and suggested, they just what their fears are, what their concerns were, like if you're a new immigrant coming in, the reception, what's going on, services that can be rendered, stuff like that. And it was an amazing session for me to attend, because I was just going there to listen.
Yeah. Now, for you attending, do you think this would have been useful? Because remember when we were new in this country, we were always experiencing this thing of you didn't know something until you stumbled upon something. You didn't know that this benefit was available, or you didn't know you could go to college. There's an option here and there's an option there. So do you think this would be beneficial to especially Kenyans who are fresh in the country?
Very beneficial.
Okay.
Because no one was there to voice, kutetea wanyonge.
Okay.
But now we have somebody, like Annette is there, and she's always on the forefront of trying to get the Kenyans in Baltimore.
Okay.
Baltimore County.
Yeah.
You start locally.
Yeah.
To participate. Get involved, come in, we have a session, she'll send us Zoom links, we'll be having, we'll have a town hall. That's what I was looking for. You'll have a town hall, participate. Because eventually, if you're not at the table,
you're going to be on the menu.
You are the menu.
You are the menu.
You are the meal right there.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to participate.
Okay.
It's okay to work and everything, but it's very important. You have your leg here, you have your kids here, and our kids are growing old. So at some point in time, they will move from 5 to 15 to
25.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are we going to do for them? How are you going? And especially with the current state of, for lack of a better word, whatever is going on racially right now. Your kids are black, yes. They may not speak Kikuyu, the Luo, whatever, but they're black.
So I think, just getting back to you, Annette, I think it's very good that we have a Kenyan who was raised here, not Kenyans who came here as adults, who understands, the system from an American perspective, but also lives within the community and understands, what, the Kenyan community, for example, goes through, and you're able to be that interface between the American local governments and the Kenyan community. Because I believe there's organizations in other states, we have Texas where we have a lot of people. I believe there's organizations out there too that are doing similar things.
Yeah.
And I think maybe to get to another level, I know your focus is on Maryland, maybe you could also just maybe do some mini research to help Kenyans who are pockets of Kenyans. Atlanta, Udimadenge, but Texas, we have Slay, we have Washeke, we have people in California who are tuned in. So if maybe if you could just do like a mini research and help them out, because despite being here for many years, I think I still strongly feel that Kenyans are still fairly politically illiterate, especially on ground politics, on matters American. I don't know how you feel about that, because you interact with more people in that respect.
I would not say fairly.
I love that statement, because it's a challenge now to Kenyans to actually be more literate and to be more involved and to stay tuned and not to be a passenger when it comes to the things that are happening in your community, and actually taking the initiative to be involved. So one thing that I will say is that there are pockets of the communities, even outside of the Kenyan Americans, whereby they're not involved, they're disengaged, and it has ramifications. And usually there's something that kind of stirs up the energy, and we're seeing that happening right now. And people are getting involved who might usually have not even been a participant in the primary. The primary election is when we choose which Democrat, which Republican, which Green Party, who is going to be the one representing, right? Many people wait until November, and it's like whoever everyone else elected, that's the person that we're going to choose. We're getting to a point right now whereby there are issues on the ballot that are going to be very consequential to our everyday lives and to our values and belief systems, and so people are getting galvanized. What I want to do is to make that process easier, to make it more digestible. A lot of things sometimes are you know, as a person who is so brilliant that you know like 3-4 languages, right? But this one particular language has gone out of its way to use language that is just so foreign and so deep that you might not have access to it. What I want to do is simplify it. I want it to be accessible. I want the language to be something that you can understand, so that when you're making decisions, you're not making decisions just because Annette said, go make this decision, but you're making informed decisions. That is the point, right? That is when the collective actually is powerful, because you don't have dictators, whether it's community leaders telling you to do one thing. Like, you actually have the ability to access information, which is super important, and then make decisions that align with your values and your goals.
Good. Now, you talked about, you know, like the November elections, how
Yes.
some people just decide, I know election is in November, the first Tuesday after Monday, so I'll wait until then to vote. What is it that all these states that have not voted in their primaries, you know, so I believe, you know, like Texas hasn't voted. I don't know whether Georgia has already voted. I don't think they've voted. So for those people who are just sitting back, relaxing, and saying, I'm just going to wait for November, what is it that they're going to be missing out if they don't participate in the primary voting process? Annette?
There's two parts. So number one, when it comes to the primary, this is when you're going to have probably the most amount of candidates that you can look at. And we're seeing that across the board with open seats that are happening congressionally, especially within the House. And we have a couple within the Senate where someone might be retiring, whatever the case may be, right? So what's happening is these seats are up for debate up until the primary. And many of them, by November, we know the Democrat is going to win, or we know the Republican is going to win.
Yes.
But it's not per se going to be the Republican that was there before, or the Democrat that was there before. So if there is something that you are frustrated about during this representative's time, and it doesn't matter what political party you yourself identify with, that person is your representative if you live within their district.
Okay.
So if you're frustrated with some of the things that are going on, the primary is the only time to really let them know, so that there can be a change in behavior or a change in your experience. The primary is very, very indicative of what your everyday life experience is going to be.
Now, you talked about congressional races. You know, like Washeke is out there in Texas. She's living her life. She's enjoying it. You know, like Congress is in D.C. Why should Washeke care about who's going to end up on the ballot, or who's going to become their representative in Congress, or for that matter, Udi or Slay, or we even have Canadians who are listening, you know, like Afro-Jamaican. I don't know whether he wants to come to America. I doubt it, but they're also interested in the American political system. But yeah, for people who are just in these different congressional districts, you know, like they're living their life, you know, like they're going for their get-togethers, their chama meetings. Everything is going for them. Right. So why should they care about who's running for Congress or who's going to win that congressional seat?
So if you're in a place like Texas, which is interesting because there's a lot of wealth there, but then you also have very rural areas, and then you also have the border. There are just so
much going on.
Things that are very, very important depending on where you are located. And not every single district within Texas is going to agree with each other, you know, and you can see plenty of memes about it. Like Dallas people are different from Houston people, who are different from San Antonio people, and so on and so forth. The reason why this is important is because within your own district, you might have, you know, some sort of like metropolitan issues that are going to be different than those in the rural areas. We have a lot of Republicans that are in Texas, right? That's a red-leaning state. But within that pool of Republicans that are there are individuals who might be interested in some of the issues that are important to you that might not necessarily fit under a typical Republican issue in another state like Maryland. And so this is talking about, you know, there are Republicans who have been in Congress trying to extend and expand benefits for those who are receiving SNAP, which is the way that some individuals, or EBT, which is how some individuals
That's what used to be called food stamps.
Food stamps,
okay.
Yeah. So those Republicans are saying, okay, this is actually not a party issue. This is an issue of how are we going to make sure that students and families are being fed within our state. Now, if you are in a state who has a Republican signing on to this bipartisan type of legislation, then you're in a good position if that's something that is important to you. There are some states where the idea might be that, you know what, it doesn't matter as long as it's not, as long as it's negatively affecting the budget or affecting the budget in a way that we don't like, we're not going to support it. So it's not just being Republican or being a Democrat. It's being an individual who's going to support the specific issues that are important to you. So my question would be, what is important to you in Texas?
Okay.
And is your leadership actually doing things to make sure that those things are going in a way that is going to be most beneficial to everyone, but also specifically you?
All right, talk to us, Texas. Tell us what's most important to you. Udi here is telling us we just got our voting cards. That's in Georgia. We have like 10 positions we need to vote for. Udi, please list some of those 10 positions here so that people can understand, you know, like what's at stake. It's not only congressional races. And then
I wonder if Stacey's on the ballot.
Who?
Stacey.
Oh, Stacey Abrams. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think this
she worked hard. Somebody just needs to put her there because they're putting her there.
Yeah, and then Udi is also saying
I don't know
let's also encourage early voting. So that's something that you're going to talk about. What is early voting? What is mail-in voting? And then Udi also says I like the idea of town halls, and then Udi Leo is on fire. He's telling Annette, can we have a conference like the Diaspora Conference in DC? A lot of Kenyans will be willing to travel. So Udi, tell us what you would want in this conference. So this is, you're talking about like a conference for Kenyans.
Yeah, that sounds like a good thing for this visit that's coming up, as well as the embassy.
Okay, that's within 2 weeks. That might be short notice.
No, what I'm saying, you know, because there's always that list of what do Kenyans want.
Yes.
What are folks in the diaspora wanting?
Okay.
Right. So you could give it there. It can be given to the diaspora desk or our diaspora rep. It can be taken to the embassy. I mean, there's, you know, so many steps and ways that this, you know, but that is actually, and I know why he's saying that, because he was a beneficiary of.
He was a beneficiary. He actually got a job
Yes.
from a diaspora conference in Kenya.
Correct.
So,
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's
and
really
I think
amazing.
it's important not just to have the conversation about let's do that, but can we talk about the practical parts, like what you're saying, but also who's going to fund this? Because in the past, when there have been diaspora meetings, the diaspora has funded it. And I find that problematic because there's a budget that certain people have, and me having to spend out of my own money just to get an audience with certain people and then might not get the actual results of what the meeting is about is very frustrating, and it's going to disenfranchise certain people and disillusion certain people. So
and you know, to get off on a tangent a bit, you know, a little bit out of topic just based on what you've said, because we want to stick to topic today. There's something in Kenya that's called CDF, Constituency Development Fund, and then there's some money that the county governments also receive from the national government. The problematic part that I have with this is that because this is still a fairly new process, money is not following functions.
Right.
So there's certain functions or tasks that the national that were devolved to the county governments, but the national government is still holding the money. So the function has been devolved. You know, like I can quote, you know, like Wajir Governor, I think his name is Ahmed Abdullahi. He said when devolution started, there were like, I think 700 or 800 doctors who had been seconded to the counties. Now there's about 4,000. But then the money that's being sent is still almost the same amount. So there's that issue, you know, and then there's an issue of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. What have you done for yourself? You know, why can't you come together and host a diaspora conference? I know that's something that a lot of Kenyan government officials sometimes like singing, but there's taxpayers' money.
They're not practical.
There's funding.
They're not being practical because there's even the corporates that would potentially gain from this workforce that's here, who would, the brain power that would go over there and make changes within those guys will sponsor.
Yes.
But somebody has to start it, meaning that there has to be a shell, and it has to start from the folks in Kenya at the diaspora desk. But because those folks who are coming in there are all new, they don't have a clue, they don't understand what the actual, in fact, I would question how many of those people who are running in or who are working in the diaspora desk or in the diaspora area have lived in the diaspora?
There's lack of experience and lack also of institutional memory. There's people who have institutional memory.
They can go back and ask.
The problem is that when regimes change, everybody comes with their own new characters. So these other people, they're already out. So unless you pay them and as consultants from
basically
their side,
what you're saying is that there isn't a system in place, and these are not issues that are new. There's nothing new under the sun. You can have a similar experience here in the U.S. During the pandemic. There was pandemic money that was given out on a federal level, and certain states did not release that money then to their localities, and that's the same thing that you're describing. So what this boils down to is, what is the system in place for that? Because someone who's coming into the job doesn't need to learn the job brand new every single time, even if they are a different character. But if you don't have now that transition, I've had the fortunate experience of being on transition teams, whereby changing from one leadership into another leadership, you have a team of people who helps you plot out, how are we going to make this transition as smooth as possible and make it in a way that the citizen is not going to be negatively impacted by the change, so that there is the transition that is
and
smooth.
There's also knowledge sharing. There's got to be some knowledge that is being passed from previous to the next, and there's records kept as a knowledge base that you go to.
But I think an important difference in the American system and in the Kenyan system is that when people are being transitioned out in the Kenyan system, in the American system, like in most governments, there's a core civil service part that's not necessarily tied to politics, that will continue operating regardless of who's on top. So the problematic part in Kenya is that all these parts move away. And this civil service part, and we're talking about the Fed, these are the core who make the cogs move, who make processes
I guess the Wakabees.
Yeah. So but the problem in Kenya is that sometimes all these people get swept out, or they get sent to other departments, because all new people want to bring in their new people, and the new people who are coming in have also other smaller new people, and the smaller new people have other smaller new people. So it becomes.
So are you saying even the person who brings chai will be changed?
So I'll give a quick example here, not to get diverted. In Mombasa County, people, even basic services as drivers, there was a time during Governor Joho's raid, and he was even saying this is a problem. There were I think 20-something drivers who were there supposedly at the governor's disposal as the governor's driver. So they got employed at some point because before Mombasa had a mayor, before it transitioned into governorship. So nasikia huyo letwa na mayor flani, huyo letwa na flani. So now they're adding to the wage bill, but then there's 20 people who come every day and they have absolutely nothing to do because they were employed. And then you don't want to remove them, because if you remove them, when you go out, your people will also be taken away. So, and this introduced a phenomena called ghost workers. People who are on a payroll, but they're not actually doing anything. But swiftly moving back to our topic, Washeke says civil engagement starts at the PTA, school board, district, decisions that impact how much and property taxes, new school redistricting that affects many of us who are parents are made there. So that's, I think, also another very important part, Annette, I wanted you to talk about, seats other than congressional seats. Board of Education, because we have a lot of parents here. What is it that people need to know about Board of Education seats? Because I'm sure in those ballot papers that Udi has received, I'm sure there's some Board of Education seats there. Talk about that, Annette.
So in the state of Maryland, or let me not say in the state of Maryland, in each district they have a different way of doing the Board of Education seats. A lot of times they're supposed to be nonpartisan, but maybe they are partisan, meaning that one is Republican or one is a Democrat or one is Green Party or one is, independent. And so that's important to note, because if you are in an area whereby it's supposed to be nonpartisan, so you just get a list of names, Republicans, Democrats, everyone gets the list of names, you don't know their
And to be clear, nonpartisan doesn't mean they don't belong to a party.
It doesn't mean that they don't belong to a party. It means that the seat is not political party.
So you don't have to declare. So it doesn't say Republican or Democrat.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting.
That requires an individual to do a little bit of research. And one of the things that has really brought this to attention, especially for members of the diaspora like us, is the fact that we have groups like Moms for Liberty who are trying to require that certain books are not in the libraries and that students don't have access to certain books. Now, the ban lists have been those who have looked at what the ban lists include, there really isn't a specific issue, and many of these books, apart from how people are illustrated or the group of people that are the focus on there. Now, there are some other issues that maybe parents might be concerned about,
like the alphabet issues.
So when the book is in the library, it doesn't mean that your child has to read the book. But the book being in the library means that your child has the opportunity to encounter it. Okay. And for someone like myself who grew up in, of course, media is so different today than how it was when I was a child. But the type of media I had access to was in the libraries, especially in school. So what my teachers had on their bookshelves had a very big impact on my self-image and my understanding of the world around me. And so it's very, very challenging for individuals who come from a diverse background. And mind you, we have to just accept the fact that this country is very, very diverse, right?
It is.
So going into a space or putting your child into a space whereby they don't have any representation of themselves or something that make them feel at home or welcomed can be an issue.
Okay. All right, that's good. And Washeke says, and school boards have become so powerful.
Yes.
YouTube women are using are using that to remove African American curriculum, Exhibit A, Moms for Liberty. And some of these groups are actually trying to, let me not use the word meddle, but they're trying to influence board elections in different districts.
Yes. I think earlier in this conversation, we talked about organizing, and this might have been an offline conversation to bring it online. When it comes to elections, there are people who are organizing, and they're thinking years in advance, and they're thinking about the nitty-gritty. So for a group of individuals like us who might be getting to know this for the first time, especially if you just came from the diaspora, you haven't been here for more than 10 years, it might seem overwhelming to understand all of these things. My point is that there are individuals and groups who are conspiring to have a certain result, and they've been thinking about this long and hard for years. And so it's your responsibility to understand what power you have, and it is at the ballot, to counteract some of this. Moms for Liberty, I can imagine that if you are here and you hear that name and you don't know what it is, it kind of sounds nice. Honestly,
it
sounds very polite, and even the word
sounds
liberty
like liberated moms.
Right.
Yeah.
So now I might think that that's something I want to be a part of. You have to actually go and find out what are they all about? Yeah. What is the definition? What is their mission statement? And if their mission statement has to do with anything that would, that would contradict your own values and the things that you're trying to do as a, person here in the States, that's something that you want to take the time to do. And here's the thing. People say it's overwhelming. It's too much information. Google is so fast. Moms for Liberty. What is Moms for Liberty? Like, what are they about? 10 seconds. Now, if you're like myself, you might go into a TikTok rabbit hole and, be on there for quite some time, but you can get that information quickly. There is nothing inaccessible to you now that we have the ability to search. And educate yourself on how to do quality searches, because not everything that's on the internet is true, but if you can have 3 verifiable sources, then you can get an understanding of what's going on out there.
They are the modern day United Daughters of the Confederacy.
Yes.
Now, it's interesting.
UDC.
United
Daughters of the
talk about
Confederacy.
that, because some people are hearing about that.
Even me in the county, we've never heard of this.
So the United Daughters of the Confederacy came about in the early 20th century. And they were very influential in the South in changing the curriculum, whitewashing history. So the books, they facilitated the books to be written in such a way that they softened slavery and what slaves went through. and they did that,
and they turned Confederate generals into heroes.
Yes, and and they did that too. So the monuments in the South, they were like 100,000 deep.
I think
United Daughters of the Confederacy.
I think what's interesting to say about that is when it comes to history, there are some Americans or individuals who might not understand the intricacies of the Civil War and why it happened and what the reasons what the reasons are. Now you can Google. I would say if you ever go to the South and visit a plantation or go to a museum and actually read the letters that were going on between the generals. This is where like you and I are having a conversation right now where it's in person and there's some level of familiarity. You're gonna get a more insightful version versus if I were to write an essay right now and give you the clean version, of what the thoughts are there. Although even in those formal texts within the Confederacy, it was very clear what the issue was. And the issue was about economics, and it was about the impact of losing slavery on the economic power that they had in the South. And so to say that was not the case would be a flat out contradiction to what the generals at that time were saying, and that's what we're seeing right now with some of the changing of what is being taught. I was taught that slavery was a factor, but I was also taught that other things were a factor. I believe that was true. Now, if we emphasize those other things and not what the original issue was, now that's on the line of misinformation.
Now bring it back to the conversation of school boards. Most of the Kenyan parents who are out here, most African parents, do not have familiarity with that American history. And this is where a bridge like yours becomes very important, because everything that happens in America, all these things that you see, there's a background to it. There's a backdrop to it. The police departments have, like a backdrop of once being slave patrols. Like there's always a historical background to all these nice, flashy institutions and organizations that you see. And it's always important to go back and look. But now the challenge is because a lot of, people who came here as adults are not familiar with that history. Some of us had a chance of encountering it in college. But for those who are not familiar with it, there's this tendency of defending. And I don't know whether you've experienced it, whereby you'll hear people start saying, there's no racism, it's the black people here who complaining. And this is something that I personally had. I don't know whether you've experienced it, but there's that tendency to try to defend the system as is. When someone comes out to you and tells you, you gotta be concerned about, who you elect on your school boards and everything. How do you deal with that kind of challenge where you're talking to people who are just so happy to be here, they don't see anything wrong, and they're just going about their lives day to day?
I think multiple things can be true at one time, and this is a very important point, especially if you have a family. Multiple things can be true at one time. I want to speak on something that is tangentially related. There's a study that went out that said that when it came to the women's mortality rate in America when it comes to having children, that African American women or women who identify as black are more likely to die or have complications, right? This is a statistics that's kind of been out there. Now, one thing that is a subset of this information was that first generation Americans, so people who came here probably as an adult, came to America and then started their family here. So, for whatever the means may be, maybe you were a student, green card holder, you came here to America and you have a child. The statistics of the impact that they had of racism was lower than their children. So now when the next generation comes, the impact of racism is harder on them than it was on the previous generation. And it doesn't mean that the previous generation didn't have a hard time. It's just that the main factors of their difficulties are different than the main factors of the difficulties of their children. Why is this important? Yes, it may be true that you come here and you don't see a problem. And maybe it's because the reason you don't see a problem is because the problems that you have overshadow some of these other conversations that are popular conversations. So your personal conversation and the popular conversation are different, right?
Okay.
So this is like me and you having a conversation, and I tell you, being a woman at night, it can be dangerous for me on a certain street.
Yeah.
Maybe you walk that street all the time.
And you're like, it's okay.
Yeah, but I'm not a 6 foot tall male with an imposing body. I know exactly how I present myself in the world.
What do you mean by imposing body?
I mean that someone might not want to fight you. Okay. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
You know,
right,
so
right.
like myself, no one is thinking.
Please don't bloat his ego.
I'm not bloating his ego. I'm just saying that there
just checking.
Two things can be true at the same time. So you walking down that street might be an okay experience. That would be the first generation American who's not experiencing the effects of systematic racism the same way as their child. One, because they're removed from the system. Your child is going through the school system, so they're seeing it from the school perspective, from the college perspective, from the workforce perspective, and it's layering on them on their most impactful times of their psychological and mental development. Okay, if the first time you're dealing with racism is when you're an adult who's fully confident in who they are, that's very different from someone in elementary school who can't even articulate their experience being, treated poorly in the classroom and not even being able to get the resources or the support at home to overcome that experience.
Okay, good. Now, in short, register to vote.
Yes.
Figure out. There's so many votes. There's so many websites that you can go to. I think Vote 411 is one of them.
It's a great one.
That's the one I was asking for. I was asking about sidebar when we were chatting. When I was asking about some information about a website or something that lists.
All of the,
That one. Okay.
Vote411.org.
Great.
Yeah, you just need to enter your address, and it will either give you a sample ballot or the different seats that you need that you're gonna be voting for. So if you can just go to vote411.org right now and check it out, it will give you your primary details.
Yes.
There's different seats. An interesting seat that I saw, on our ballot on the side of Montgomery County that I live in, is the people who are going to the Democratic National Convention.
Right.
Now, this time the Democrats do not have a competitive race, and I think even the Republicans too, they no longer have a competitive race. We pretty much know who the candidates are going to be for both parties.
For the presidential. Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing that I saw this time on the Democratic Party is that there was, of course, the choice of you have to select a candidate that you support, and then people will vote based on that. But the interesting thing I saw, there were people who had Biden, and then there was a list of people who are uncommitted.
Right.
Yeah, and there was a very interesting demographic of the people who are uncommitted. We're going to talk about that later on, and what kind of message maybe they're trying to send.
Right.
So make sure you check the dates. There's what are the different ways of voting?
So in the state of Maryland, we have a lot of great voter access. And so if you're not in the state of Maryland and you don't have multiple ways, make a plan and make it in advance. Are you going to go to the polls at 7 o'clock? Are you going to drive? Is it going to cost you extra time? Are the kids going to be together? Don't let your children be the reason why you don't vote, because you need to vote on their behalf. They can't vote, right? But in the state of Maryland, you can do a mail-in ballot. What I love about the mail-in ballots here is that if you go to one of those early voting locations, they have a box right there that you can put it right in there, and it has the Maryland flag on it. We love our flag.
You can't miss it.
You cannot miss it, and you can put it right there. Make sure you sign it. Make sure you fill in everything that you need to fill in and slip it right into that box. You can also use.
How do you get the mail-in vote? The mail-in ballot.
You requested it previously, and
so at this time,
you either have it or you don't. So you either requested it or you did not.
Okay, so your options become two,
and that is okay. So if you did not request that, then right now, yesterday we started our early voting in person. Go to your Maryland Electoral Board, and they will tell you all of the locations within your district, and you can vote at any of those locations. So let's say you live near this one voting location, but this other one is near your job. So it's more convenient to go right after work and then drive home.
Correct.
You will still be able to vote at that location. This is the only time you can do that is early voting. So make sure you take an opportunity to do your early voting and look at the locations, and again, make a plan. So that's from the 2nd until the 9th.
Correct.
That you have an opportunity. They always make sure that there is a weekend possible for you to do this. So if you choose to do this on a Saturday and Sunday and you have young children, this is a good time to train them up in the way you should grow and show them what that process is like. And if not, then you also have the weekends, and they open early and they close late. So 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
And to be clear, early voting is not necessarily in the same location as the people who are going to go to vote on the polling day.
Right.
It could be a different location, because I think sometimes people get confused.
School, church,
yes,
library.
that can be confusing and
Yeah.
it can be frustrating. And this is why I want everyone to just make a plan in advance. So if you go to your electoral board online, you should be able to put your address and find out what your voting location is. So in Maryland, on May 14th, you can go to one of these locations. They tend to be schools or community centers, and do your vote that way. But on May 14th, you cannot choose which place you want to go and vote. You have to go to your specific
polling place.
polling location. And some polling locations, like where I am registered to vote, there you can go to this high school, you can go to the library, you can go to the gymnasium, and those are different districts within the same school. So
that's amazing.
It is
I've never
very,
seen
very
that.
specific. So please, please, please make sure that you look in advance. One thing that I will say about Maryland, there was a comment about the lines, and in the state of Maryland, the lines have been mitigated by the fact that that there are different ways of voting. So instead of a long line just on primary election day, a lot of people are just finding there's a little bit of congestion in the early morning hours, those who are voting before going to work, before school, and then those who are voting in the afternoon or in the evening. So the best time to go right now for early voting in the state of Maryland is during lunchtime.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. And the other interesting thing that I also noticed about the early voting, because I did vote early in the last election, and I knew that like campaign material and advertising and candidates are not allowed around the polling place on election day. But what I didn't know is that they're allowed there during early voting.
Yeah.
So I went there, and it was my first time doing early voting, and I was like, don't these guys know that they're doing something illegal? Because there was a whole horde of people who are waiting for you, like scavengers, like with flyers and everything. Like they're waiting for you.
Yeah.
I know Annette is smiling because maybe she's been one of those scavengers at some point. They're waiting for you, and they're telling you, and and I like what you said, be prepared before you go there, because don't go to make a decision when you're at the polling place. This is not like Kenya, where you're voting for member of parliament, you're voting for the president, here there's judges that you're voting for.
Right.
There's people who are going to represent you at the Democratic Convention or Republican Convention, depending on what party you belong to.
Right.
There's Board of Education. There's all these different seats. Like there's some states that are voting for attorney generals.
Right.
So when you have not, reviewed the list and decided on who you're going to vote for, then you'll be swayed by the loudest people.
Right.
Who come out there. Yeah, they'll come, with all kinds of flashy flyers and everything. And I found that very, very interesting, because
and sometimes they could sway people as well.
They do.
And they do.
They
Yeah,
do.
they could sway people.
They do.
as well,
So
yeah.
when it comes to election, there are rules, and what you may not have noticed if you aren't keen to pay attention, which there might not be a reason for you to pay attention, is there is usually a sign, and it says electioneering. Like there's like an electioneering line. So anyone who is trying to convince people, like, this is my flyer, like this is the candidate that I'm supporting, this is why you should support them, there's a line that you cannot cross.
You cannot cross, yeah.
Right. In addition to that, if I am volunteering for a person, a political candidate, and I have stickers or gear or something that lets you know who I am here to persuade you to vote for, I cannot go into the facility with that while people are voting. So what people do is, you put on a sweater or something like that, because that would be past the line, right? So there are rules. On election day, there are a lot more polling places than early voting sites. So let's say early voting sites, your county has, let's say 10 early voting sites. But on election day, it might be 35 to 45 different voting sites. So maybe what you experienced was that the area that you were in, there were not as many people, maybe because they decided that they want to put their volunteers in areas that might be a little bit contestable, maybe areas where there might be some convincing possible.
Like near the parking spaces, they were hitting you.
Yes.
You know, like right when you get off the car. And then, you know, there was also this interesting, you know, like, because I've gone with my mother to at that time I'd gone with my mom to the polling place, and they saw a hijab, and the volunteer who had the hijab just made a beeline straight to us. And of course, the reason why I know this impacts what people make choices. At that point, my mom was like, "Oh, you know, like we're gonna choose her." You know, and I'm like, we don't even know if she's a candidate or she's a volunteer or whatever. But it's very. A
lot of times the candidates are themselves actually
the candidates, you know, they are especially like judges, and you know, like these local elections. What people don't get is that the margins sometimes are very thin. You know, the margins are very thin. You could see an election won by 5 votes. You could see an election won by 10 votes. This happens so many multiple times, and people don't just quite understand how much of an impact you can have. Let's say like you have a family of 5. You know, like that's enough to sway, you know, like a seat. So if you take some time and do some research, you could actually be doing research for something that will go back and work in your favor. Because a lot of times people are just like, oh, you know, like I'm just 1 vote, or we're 2 or 3 votes, we're not going to make a difference. On those local seats,
they make a lot of difference. In the Baltimore County where I am the current executive who's running for Congress, Johnny Olszewski, he originally won by a 17 vote different margin.
Not 17,000.
17, 1-7 vote margin. And so as you know, those numbers are coming in, and this is like an area where it might be contestable, where you might have to, you know, recount and all of that. 17 votes is just not a large margin, and so every vote did count in that particular election. And now, if he were not to have made it to county executive, like the next step, would that have happened? You know, so right now, the county executive for Baltimore County is running for Congress in his district, and you know, that is something that you don't take for granted. So if you know that you only won by 17 votes in one election, you don't take for granted that you're gonna win the next election by a huge margin. So every single vote matters.
Okay. Now, you know, like talking Maryland, there was an issue about the Baltimore Bridge, you know, which was national news.
Yes.
And everyone, you know, like has something to say because it impacted people in different ways, especially those of you, you know, like Uno Mike and yourself, you guys live on that side.
And have grown up with the bridge pretty much.
Yes, you know, like Omosh is close, you know, like I'm on this other side, but this is something that was very impactful to the community. So just talking about an example of the Baltimore Bridge, maybe just talk to us about what the latest is on if it's going to be rebuilt, when it's going to be rebuilt, and how the tax dollars that you pay and the people that you choose affects the maintenance and the repair and even the rebuilding of such infrastructure. Annette.
This is such a huge, unprecedented event that has happened in our community. And first and foremost, my heart goes out to the families of the individuals who lost their lives. There were 6 individuals working overnight constructing and, you know, making repairs on the bridge on that evening. And as of right now, 5 of those individuals' remains have been discovered and recovered. And that is a great, you know, thing for the families who want to honor their loved ones, but there is one that's still missing, and I can only imagine the devastation. I do want to also acknowledge the individuals who came together so quickly and held a vigil and just came to console those family members in the community that was affected directly by the losses of those 6 individuals. When it comes to the bridge collapse itself, one, you know, on my way over here, I was able to drive and look on the waters as I was driving, and I didn't see that bridge, and it was such a heartbreaking.
It's eerie, right?
Experience.
Yeah.
Yes, just to see an openness when
An
there
open
used
space
to be
where
a
there was a
bridge
landmark.
that I saw every single time. And it
That
was
reminds me of World Trade Center.
it's
same
just such
thing.
an eerie feeling. Earlier in the week, I was in the Dundalk area, Sparrows Point area, and I actually reached the last
Sparrows
exit.
Point, yeah.
Yeah, the very last exit where now it's a road closed sign and you can only go through that last exit. And that was quite an emotional experience, just trying to get to where I was going, because that was the first time I saw that, right? So this is such a huge thing for those of us who live in this area. But what's important to understand about how elections matter is what was the response, right? Did people come together immediately? Was there information? Was there collaboration? Who collaborated? Who came out on the scene? Who was there? And that's very important, because even when you lose a loved one, the people who are there that first day, that second, you might not remember anything else. But in our culture, where people come to console with you on that first day, that second day, to just help you that first week, those people are embedded in your brain
Forever.
Correct.
you know, because that's such a it's sad that it has happened, but some people do step up. So in Baltimore, now we're talking about a regional area, so we have the Baltimore County executive, who of course was on scene immediately. We have the mayor as well, because this is connecting these two areas, Brandon Scott, who was there immediately. We also have the troopers, the police who were involved. I'm so grateful for the individuals who did their best to make sure that the road was clear, because other individuals would have been on that bridge had it not been for the police
it
closing.
was so eerie seeing those last cars move across.
That truck, that 18-wheeler.
And you had no idea what's going on when you're driving on that bridge. For me, I'm focused on getting on the other side. I am definitely not looking at what's going on in the water. And so,
even if you saw it, then what? Do you jump in the water?
Exactly. It's so,
because you're not thinking this thing is going to hit the bridge and the bridge is coming down.
Yeah, because the math is a math with that, right? All of these years, has that ever happened?
It's never happened.
No,
yeah.
this is such
And
an
we're used to, like,
unprecedented
if
thing.
you do, like, the bridge that it's over the one Queenstown, is it? Do you know that bridge? There's a
Queenstown.
bridge that that comes from Maryland going into, I guess, if you're on your way to Delaware.
On your way
Yes,
to
I know
Delaware,
exactly what you're
yeah.
talking about,
That's
yeah.
a
Off
long
Route
bridge,
50.
yeah.
And that one
bridge,
normally and it's high. It's very,
very
high.
high.
Those,
And that
those
one
are
is
the ones
that
where
like,
people learn how to pray who've never prayed.
is that like
that's
10?
It's
Is
a
it like
big bridge.
Yeah,
it's-
yeah.
Is it 5 to 10 miles? Because they normally have a walk every summer. There's a walk. They
On the
shut
bridge.
down. Yeah, they shut down one side, and
Yeah.
folks they have a walk from one side to the other. But there are
Yeah.
people who can't even cross with their vehicles there. They have folks who get paid
Yeah.
to drive
Yes.
your vehicle across.
People do not know
the
this.
Bay Bridge,
I
too.
learned this when I was on the Bay Bridge.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so this was a group trip,
Yeah,
and it was like,
that's the
okay,
bridge I'm
can
talking
you
about.
make
It's the Bay Bridge.
the Bay Bridge? That one, like, is if you're going to Ocean City.
Yeah.
So there's
Yes.
so
That's
Ocean
the one you cross.
So, and there's a place, and you can make the call, and the person will come, and they'll take you across that bridge. And I've been able to drive through that bridge, but there's sometimes when they're constructing on one side, then you might have two-way traffic on another
yeah.
side.
Yeah, that's tricky.
And that
Especially
is-
at night.
Man, that is quite the experience. It's quite unnerving.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of these things are infrastructure, which is important to point out, because one of the things that President Joe Biden was really particular about doing during his term was an infrastructure bill, which did get passed. And so we have money that's going and allocated to different states. Interestingly enough, not bridges, but airports. Dulles Airport was getting money to expand because of the infrastructure bill.
Because of the metro, or
No, not the metro specifically, but the airport itself, expanding their terminals, the Airbuses.
Yeah, they have a lot of traffic.
There's a lot that goes on in Dulles Airport. So Dulles Airport was allocated, I don't know the exact figure, but several $1 million for Dulles Airport. Martin State Airport, which is also in Maryland and Baltimore County, which is in Baltimore County, is also getting an allocation. Texas, there's an airport in Texas that's getting an allocation for this infrastructure bill. The reason why I'm bringing this up while we're talking about the bridge is that bridge is infrastructure.
Correct.
And so there was money that was supposed to go to Maryland already, with the attempts of improving roads. And if you live in Maryland, you know these roads are always under construction, right?
Correct.
So there's
100% of the
always
time.
under construction.
Since
somehow.
before Mosh arrived,
Yo.
you've always been under construction.
83.
Was
Yeah,
that to
no.
95?
Man.
To 95, when you're coming from, if you're northbound, right before you get into the city, there's always been construction.
695 always has construction.
Always.
When you're rolling from Towson,
Towson onward,
Yeah.
you know.
you're like, what the heck is going on? And then if you're headed to York, that whole 83, you're like, okay, what is going on here?
Right, and so with 695, that's where the bridge was that collapsed. So you would have taken 695 to get on that bridge. And so what happened was that we had money that was allocated, but this was then a time for us to talk about what can we do as far as emergency funding? What can we do as far as making sure that there is longevity as far as this funding is concerned? Because when it first happened, we didn't know anything. What we knew is that we needed to do something immediately. Mm-hmm. I'm so grateful that the primary concern for not only the mayor of Baltimore City, but the county executive of Baltimore County and our counterparts in Congress, as well as those in the state, was to find the individuals
Correct.
who
A
lost their life.
Bodies, yeah.
A rescue mission.
So it was a
or
rescue mission.
retrieve, yes.
And at some point it became evident that we were trying to not rescue living beings, but making sure that we're able to recover. Yes. And so I'm grateful that was the focus. But that also required resources before papers are signed. So this is what happened. Baltimore County, Baltimore City, and friends, including PG County, decided that they were going to make sure that these efforts happened, signed for payroll before the official check had already been signed. This is significant. This means that instead of the leadership saying, let's wait and see where this money is going to come before we send divers,
they were paying them. They were like, we're going to pay you regardless.
We're going to send divers.
Okay.
Because this is important. This is life or death.
Yes.
And we need to do this immediately. We can figure out the accounting later.
Also, PG County from the outside.
Yes. Angela Brooks actually made sure that the divers would be available. And here's the thing. These are very specialized trades. Not everybody has divers that they can just go and deploy, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be somebody who has these resources, the human resources available immediately. And so they were deployed immediately, and it no wonder Baltimore County Executive Olszewski and also PG County Executive also Brooks have that relationship whereby they are supporting each other's campaigns, because even when they're not campaigning, there has been support between those two. That's what matters. Not only do you want to have somebody who's going to advocate for you within your district, you want somebody who is not going to be burning bridges within those colleagues that they have within the state, within the Senate, within Congress, right? So this ability to collaborate between the Baltimore City, Baltimore County, PG County, and the other areas that also sent support is very, very important.
Okay.